December 5th, 1941, 4:30 a.m. outside Moscow, near Klin. The temperature is around minus 25 degrees Celsius. 3 million Axis troops have already marched more than 1,000 miles since June. The Red Army has lost millions of men, killed, wounded, or captured. And yet it's still here, still forming new lines. Germany is exhausted, short on fuel, and running on a rail network that doesn't match its own gauges. So here's the question. If Germany fought only the USSR, no Britain, no U-boats in the Atlantic, no bombing campaign, no second front, who breaks first? Why? Because on paper, removing the West looks like a cheat code. No Battle of Britain, no Mediterranean drain, no U-boat war, no American factories feeding two oceans. More planes, more fuel, more steel, more trucks, more divisions, all pointed east. What you're about to discover explains why more focus still doesn't automatically equal victory in the biggest land war in human history. By the end, you'll understand the real breaking point in this matchup, and it's not courage, not ideology, not even tank quality. But first, you need to understand what actually breaks armies: rail, fuel, replacements, and the ability to turn casualties into new units faster than the other guy. Now imagine the rules of this what if. What if Britain makes peace after France falls in 1940 and stays out? What if the United States never enters the European war, never sends Lend-Lease, never floods the oceans with ships and trucks? What if Germany never bleeds divisions in North Africa, never loses thousands of aircraft over the Channel, never has its cities smashed night after night? What if the entire German war effort becomes a single, obsessive project? Break the USSR before the USSR learns how to fight this war. Could they have won? And if not, who breaks first, one-on-one? Germany versus the Soviet Union. Who snaps? Drop your prediction in the comments right now before we build the logic. And if you're here for real history, not myths, subscribe. All right, let's set the rules. What stays the same? Germany is still Germany, a continental power with world-class operational art, excellent staff work, and a military built around fast campaigns. But it's also a state with a chronic oil problem, a limited pool of trained replacements, and an economy that, unless fully mobilized early, can't magically outproduce a giant. The Soviet Union is still the Soviet Union: enormous manpower, huge depth, brutal winters, and a government willing to lose an entire army group's worth of men if it buys time. It also has the key resource Germany doesn't: major oil fields inside its own territory, and a deep interior where factories can be moved beyond reach. What changes? No Western Front means Germany doesn't have to garrison thousands of miles of coastline waiting for a landing. No RAF and no USAF means German industry isn't forced to fight a second war in the sky, losing skilled workers, machines, and transportation nodes to bombs. No Battle of the Atlantic means Germany isn't throwing steel into U-boats while the Allies throw even more steel into escort ships and aircraft. And the biggest change: no American trucks, locomotives, rails, food, and raw materials flowing into the USSR. But here's the catch. Removing the West helps Germany in two ways: focus and survival. It helps the USSR in one gigantic way: time. Because without a second front, Stalin can trade space for time even more aggressively, knowing nobody is coming from the West to split German attention. So the war becomes a single question of endurance. Can Germany kill the Soviet field army and seize the Soviet economic heart fast enough that the USSR collapses politically and militarily, before Germany's logistics and fuel system collapse operationally? Now zoom out. In June 1941, Germany starts Barbarossa with roughly 3.3 million Axis troops in the opening wave, thousands of tanks, and a doctrine built for encirclement. In the first months, the Soviet Union suffers losses that look impossible to survive. Entire armies disappear, hundreds of thousands at a time. That's the part people remember. But the part people miss is what Germany is spending to buy those encirclements: fuel, tires, engines, trained infantry, rail capacity, and above all, time. Because every mile east is not just distance, it's friction. Roads become mud then ice. Rail lines change gauge, bridges need rebuilding, trucks break down at a rate nobody can replace in the field. And the further you go, the more of your army becomes a long, vulnerable supply chain instead of a fighting force. So here's the first constraint that decides who breaks first: logistics. Germany can win battles faster than it can move supplies. The Soviet Union can lose battles faster than it can lose the war. Compare that to what the West being gone changes. With no air war over Germany, the Reich keeps more trained pilots, more aircraft production stability, more intact rail yards, and more uninterrupted coal and steel flow. With no Mediterranean and no Atlantic war, Germany redirects some shipbuilding steel, some aircraft, some ammunition, some fuel, and some divisions east. That's a real boost. But it doesn't change the geometry of Russia. It doesn't move the Urals closer. It doesn't make Soviet rail lines suddenly match German rolling stock. And it doesn't create oil wells in Germany. Which brings us to the second constraint: fuel. Germany's best-case victory requires continuous mobility, deep drives, rapid encirclements, exploitation, and constant pressure so the USSR can't stabilize. That style of war is gasoline. As it is aviation fuel, it is spare parts delivered on time, and Germany's fuel situation is a knife at the throat from day one. Even if Germany isn't fighting the West, the Eastern Front is a fuel furnace. Tanks, trucks, half-tracks, aircraft, trains, generators. A mechanized army doesn't run out slowly. It hits a point where units stop moving, and then the enemy starts moving instead. So if Germany is going to win this one-front war, it has to do it quickly, or it has to capture Soviet oil, restore it, and protect it while still fighting. That is not one problem. That's 5 problems stacked on top of each other. Capture the Caucasus. Hold the Caucasus. Repair the wells and refineries. Move the oil through pipelines and rails that will be sabotaged. And do all of that while the Red Army is still alive. That's the difference. Now let's test the Germany focuses everything scenario in phases. Phase 1, 1941, the kill shot attempt. In the real war, Germany comes terrifyingly close to a decisive psychological victory in 1941, not because Moscow is a magic city, but because Moscow is the hub. Roads, rail, administration, symbol. In this what if, Germany has more aircraft available because it didn't bleed a year over Britain. It may have more trained pilots, it may have fewer resource diversions, and it may choose a cleaner strategy. 1 main effort, not 3. So, it concentrates harder on Moscow. That could change the operational picture. A Moscow taken in late 1941 or early 1942 is not instant USSR collapse, but it is a shockwave. It disrupts rail movement. It threatens Central Command cohesion. It forces the Soviet state to govern from deeper east under more panic. But here's the catch again. Taking Moscow does not delete Soviet industry. The USSR has already been evacuating factories east. It can keep building tanks, guns, and aircraft beyond the immediate front. And the Red Army can still form new armies, even if they're badly trained, because manpower depth is its core advantage. So the question becomes, can Germany turn a Moscow success into the destruction of the Soviet field army? Because cities don't win wars by themselves, armies do. And this is where the West being gone matters in a darker way. No Lend-Lease means the Soviet Union is short on the unglamorous things that make modern war work. Trucks, locomotives, rails, communications gear, and high-octane aviation fuel additives. Without a river of imported trucks, Soviet operational mobility suffers. It becomes harder to rush reserves, harder to sustain deep offensives, harder to exploit German retreats later. That helps Germany. It might delay the Soviet ability to recover and counterattack at scale. It might make 1942 and 1943 less catastrophic for Germany than they were historically. But it still doesn't solve Germany's core math problem: replacement power. Germany's army is not infinite. Its best soldiers, non-commissioned officers, and junior officers, its professional danger, are a finite resource. The Soviet system can grind men into units faster than Germany can grind units into experienced formations. So even in a one-front war, Germany must avoid a long war. And here's the paradox. To win quickly, Germany must drive deep and fast. To drive deep and fast, Germany must spend fuel and wear out vehicles. The deeper it goes, the more it needs trucks, and trucks die in Russia. So the very act of trying to win fast accelerates the breakdown of the system that enables winning fast. That's not drama. That's mechanics. Phase 2. 1942. The oil gamble. If Germany hasn't broken the USSR in 1941, it faces a choice in 1942. Option A, keep pushing the Central Front, trying to crush Soviet armies around the core. Option B, go for the Caucasus oil and hope fuel becomes the lever that ends the war. Historically, Germany chased both, splitting effort. In this what if, with more resources and fewer distractions, it might execute the oil plan more cleanly. But here's what doesn't change: distance and vulnerability. The southern thrust stretches supply lines into a nightmare. The further Germany advances, the more it must guard rail lines, bridges, depots, and roads from partisans and raids. Every division used to guard a line is a division not used to break the enemy. And the Soviets don't need to win in the Caucasus immediately. They just need to deny Germany a functioning oil pipeline long enough that German mobility dies. That changes everything, because even a successful capture of oil fields is not the same as usable fuel at the front. Oil is not gasoline. Oil needs refining, transport, storage, and security, all in an active war zone. So the German best case in 1942 is not, we took oil, now we win. It's, we took oil, now maybe we can keep moving next year, so... And that's a terrifyingly small payoff for an enormous gamble. Phase 3, 1943, the attrition wall. If the USSR is still standing by 1943, this stops being a blitz war. It becomes a production war. Germany without Western bombing is stronger here. It keeps more factories intact, more transport nodes functioning, more skilled workers alive. It can field more aircraft, keep a more stable armaments output, and suffer fewer catastrophic disruptions. But the USSR is also stronger than people think, even without external help, because it's fighting on home territory with a war economy built around mass production and brutal acceptance of loss. And here's where the West being gone helps the USSR in one crucial psychological way. There is no hope of rescue needed. In the real war, the USSR fights knowing a second front might come, but it can't bet its survival on it. In this what if, the USSR has no choice but to become a fortress state that learns, adapts, and bleeds Germany out. That means it doubles down on depth, trading territory, building defensive belts, rebuilding armies, and forcing Germany to attack prepared positions repeatedly. And repeated assaults are where Germany breaks, because Germany's advantage is maneuver and operational surprise. Prepared defense turns that advantage into a casualty exchange. And casualty exchange favors the side with more men and more depth. So the war starts to look like this. Germany wins the quality per unit contest. The USSR wins the quantity over time contest. Germany needs a decisive collapse event. The USSR only needs Germany to fail to achieve decision again and again until German formations hollow out. Now, zoom out one more time and ask the real breaking question. What does break actually mean? For the USSR, break means political collapse. Stalin removed, the state fragments. Armies stop obeying central command, peace is forced. For Germany, break means operational paralysis, fuel shortages, transport collapse, manpower exhaustion, and eventually strategic defeat. So who is more likely to suffer that kind of break first? If Germany can take Moscow in 1941 and destroy enough Soviet armies that the state loses command cohesion, the USSR can break first. That's the narrow German win window, a shock so violent and so early that the Soviet machine can't reorganize. But if the USSR survives into 1942 as a coherent fighting state, the advantage begins to slide toward the USSR. Because Germany's war is built on movement, and movement is built on fuel and logistics that get worse every month. That's the trap. Germany is not fighting the USSR. Germany is fighting the USSR plus geography. And geography never runs out of reinforcements. Now, let's be concrete. In a one-front scenario, Germany likely does better in 1941 and 1942. It likely advances farther. It likely has a stronger Luftwaffe in the east. It likely avoids some disasters that came from overextension while also facing Allied pressure elsewhere. And without Lend-Lease, the USSR's later war mobility, those massive rolling offensives, becomes harder. Fewer trucks means fewer deep exploitation thrusts. Fewer locomotives means slower supply recovery. The Red Army can still fight, but it may take longer to deliver the knockout blows it delivered historically. So the war stretches, and stretching is exactly what Germany cannot afford. Because Germany's system breaks quietly, units become under strength. Spare parts vanish. Training pipelines thin. Veterans die and are replaced by men who don't have time to become veterans. The USSR's system breaks loudly. Catastrophic losses, cities abandoned, millions dead. But as long as Central Command holds and industry keeps producing, the USSR can absorb loud damage and keep fighting. That's the difference. So in this what if, the most likely outcome is not a clean German victory or a quick Soviet collapse. And it's a longer war where Germany avoids the catastrophic two-front disaster but still fails to achieve decision and eventually loses the ability to attack. And once Germany can attack, the initiative flips. Even a truck-poor Soviet Union can still grind forward with artillery, rail, and manpower, slower, uglier, but relentless. Now here's the part people miss. A one-front war removes Western bombing, yes, but it also removes the Western pressure that forced Germany to make desperate choices early, choices that revealed how fragile its fuel and logistics truly were. Without the West, Germany may delay total mobilization, believing time is on its side. And that delay is fatal, because the USSR's strength is not that it starts strong, it's that it becomes strong while you're failing to end it. So, the Soviet breaking point is early, 1941. The German breaking point is late, after years of grinding when it discovers it can't finish the job. That's why the answer is so uncomfortable. If Germany fights only the USSR suffers a worse opening disaster than in real history. It may lose more territory, it may come closer to panic, it may even lose Moscow. But if it does not break politically in that first window, Germany is the one that breaks first operationally, because its war machine is a high-performance engine with a fuel tank that's too small and a supply line that's too long. So let's go back to December 5th, 1941. Outside Moscow, minus 25 degrees Celsius. In the real timeline, Germany is already being forced to fight a war it cannot supply. In this what if, Germany arrives with more strength, but it still arrives at the same wall, winter, distance, and a Soviet state that refuses to stop existing. And that reframes the whole question. This isn't who has better soldiers, this is who can stay a country longer under maximum stress. My answer? In a Germany only versus USSR war, the USSR is more likely to break first only if Germany lands a decisive early political shock, 1941 so severe that Soviet command coherence collapses. If the USSR survives that first year as a functioning war state, then Germany breaks first, later, because fuel, logistics, and trained manpower run out before the Soviet Union's depth does. So what would you bet on? A fast German kill shot in 1941, Borodidam, or Soviet survival long enough for Germany's system to seize up? Which one breaks first, USSR politically or Germany operationally? Drop your answer in the comments. Subscribe if you want real history logic, not legend. Thanks for watching.